Good morning everyone. I am Dr. Vivek Singh, Department of English, Banaras Hindu University. Welcome to the course Disability Studies in India, Historical, Social and Cultural Perspectives. So in this course I am going to talk the first module, that is going to be Introduction to the course, Methodology, Definition and Key Concepts, and the lecture number 1 would be the Origin of Disability Studies. So before I jump in what is the lecture number 1 is all about, let's talk about what the course is all about, what I am going to do with this course. So this course is going to be very comprehensive understanding of what disability studies is, what disability is, and how people are represented in popular culture, in literature and other forms of art. Since the context is India, so I am simultaneously looking at how disability studies evolved in the West, as well as how it was adopted, how it was understood, how it was reappropriated in India. So I will also looking at the history of disability studies, social perspective of his disability studies, and as well as how different cultures of India have thought of about disability. So the course will also cover not only the theoretical and conceptual framework, but will also talk about that how films, how literature and how social policies and legal frameworks have understood disability. And since disability studies is a new phenomena, but disability is a very old phenomena, as we all know. So therefore our job in this course is going to be to redefine what disability is, how disability has been understood, how disability has been looked at, and what are the perspectives we have either from gender or from class, race, caste, and also political perspectives. So all those perspectives are going to come to understand about disability studies. So in this module, Introduction to the course, that is Methodology, Definition and Key Concepts, I have deliberately designed in such a way the module number 1 is so that we can know the methodology which are extremely significant to understand the course, and what are the basic understanding, basic definitions and key concepts are around disability studies. Because I have seen students using the word interchangeably, however they don't understand that these words have a different connotation, these words have a different meaning, and therefore we are not supposed to use the word interchangeably. For example, let's say I have seen people using disability and impairment as if they both mean the same. That's not true, right? When you are getting into the disability studies as a teacher, as a research scholar, as a beginner students, our job is to understand and comprehend the very definition associated with disability studies. So the lecture number 1 is going to talk about the origin of disability studies. So in this lecture what I am going to say that how disability studies emerged to talk about the concern of people with disabilities. Alright, so let's look at the slide number 1, where I am going to talk about that how disability is a worldwide phenomena with a global consequence. What I mean by this, according to theoreticians or academicians, disability is something that is not limited to one particular place, right? One thing which I will be keep arguing differently, and obviously when I will be talking about different ideas, you will see that these ideas constantly reflect, these are constantly going to reflect and shape the further understanding. Because let's say for example, just to explain to you in a simple way, for example when you are black, right, let's say for example you have a black identity or you are a black person. So you may say that this particular location is about black communities, right? So you can say that this particular identity or this particular community is limited to this particular culture or this particular geographical locations. But that's not going to be true or acceptable about disability, because disability is a kind of a phenomena which is which can be found in fact everywhere, right? Even if it is a Northern Europe or Southern Europe, or let's say North America, Southern America, or let's say India, Asia, Africa, you name any continent, you name any countries, you name any district, you name any place, you name any region, you name any cities, you will see that disability is available, right? This idea, this notion, this body, people with disabilities can be found everywhere. So therefore, one may not say that this is only limited to one particular place. This identity can be seen or noticed, can be found everywhere. So, as slowly and gradually the people are being aware of the rights, people are understanding that how people are discriminated, it is getting into the public consciousness, right? Everyone is now conscious about disability. Initially, I am sure that if you look back the history, disability was not something being always talked about, which I will talk that how it became a very prominent phenomena after 1990s or 1980s. However, I will also debate that 1980s, 1990s is not the time where disability emerged, but for now, just to understand chronologically, we see that after 1990s, everywhere in seminars, conferences, books started coming out talking about disability studies, all right. So, due to the political change in society in the different countries, it became an agenda as well, like disability became a political agenda. So, it exists both as a personal and also a public experience, right. For example, that one is a disabled, right, one for example, like what I mean to say, that it's a personal tragedy, how people look at it. Sometimes it is looked as something to be avoided or concealed and often managed in the privacy of one's home and family life. However, for others you will see that disability is a source of pride and empowerment. It's like key element of self-identity and self-worth that bring together a community committed to advocating for human rights, citizenship and celebration of diversity. So, when you see that when the people are going to talk about the idea of citizenship, people are going to talk about the rights, people are going to talk about the celebration of diversity, then you will notice that most of the people have to come together. Every disabled identity have to come together to talk about the human rights. However, it also a personal, which means to say that sometimes it also looked as is a like personal problems, like it's not a community problem, it's not a problem where society has to come together to deal with, but sometimes it is also looked at as if it's a personal concern, right. So, that is what I mean to say that disability exists as both a personal and public experience, right. So, for many of us, disability reshape our life, right. Let us say for example, I am thinking about my body, about my society differently. I have the way I have been looking at society, people, interactions is very different. But suppose for example, if I become disabled, quote unquote, if I become disabled, immediately my perspective by looking at the people, society's interaction will change. So, this is why for many people what we see that disability reshapes our lives. It offers a very new understanding of what it means to be human, right, and then we get to know that human means dependence, human means creating emotions, love, care and empathy, right. So far if you have everything, you think you are able, society is structured in such a way that it only caters your interest, then obviously you will realize, you will feel, you will understand that you will think about society very differently. But the moment you get into disability, it is going to reframe your entire understanding of the society and lives. So, this difference enrich our society, right. It also forges a very strong social connection, it creates new responsibilities, it also offers a lot of opportunities for individuals, families and communities. So, I am sure that once you are not in disability identity and if you are so called able identity, your perspective is very different to look at the society. But the moment you get into this, you embody disability, it becomes a different and fresh perspectives to look at the societies, right. So, disability studies is a kind of a growing field which is rooted in the social science, humanities and rehabilitation science. So, before that disability used to be just a object of study which is to be studied by only medical science, right. But when disability studies started growing, we saw that it has roots also in humanities, it also has roots in social science and also rehabilitation service. So, as my lecture proceeds, you will notice that I am going to talk about that how disability studies borrowed all its concept, ideas, theoretical framework from different disciplines and then it emerged and gave it a new shape to itself, all right. So, these disciplines offer very theoretical and conceptual tools to tackle the recurring theme in the field, highlighting critical issues and provide a very deep understanding of its challenges. So, it has a different way to study disability and its society, because the way we look at society and the kind of study we do, if we are looking from different perspectives, if we are examining it from different perspectives, then disability studies is going to challenge this, and it asks for new way to think about society and the body, right. So, this is why I am saying that it becomes it provides a very deeper understanding, and also the kind of challenge it produces is very refreshing new. So, what it suggests integrative approach to unify the field. So, central to the development of disability studies is the inclusion of the disability community, as well as those with disabilities who may not actively engage in the community or its discourse. So, the point what I am trying to suggest here is that disability studies mainly was established just initially to tackle the interest of people with disabilities. It realized that people with disabilities are marginalized, they are overlooked, they are not being taken care of, they are deprived, their right is not considered, and therefore disability studies was established so that the concern of people with disabilities can be foregrounded, can be brought to the forefront, so that people can listen and talk about it. People can, so these, like the job of disability studies was to foreground these marginalized voices, right. And therefore, it started asking very new kind of a questions which was never asked. In fact, people slightly concealed asking these kind of questions. So, let us say for example, what kind of question it asks? It asks question, who are disabled people, right? Whom do you consider that they are disabled people? For example, if I have to debate and contest with this idea that who are disabled people, so I am going to ask you, for example, the people who are come from upper class and they are not economically deprived, they are disabled people, or the person who is economically deprived, they are disabled people, right. Let me put it more difficult understanding to that. Let us say for example, there is a person who is impaired and he comes from a rich class. Is he disabled? Or a woman who is suffering from poverty, she is a poverty stricken girl and she is also impaired one. So, who is disabled, right? So, one may say that they both are disabled, but their disability is different, right? Their understanding, their way of looking at the society is different, and the society, the way to look at them is also different. So, here you see that I brought two examples for you, and you are for a second not clear whom to call disabled, whom not to call disabled, right. So, this is the question that we need to ask, whom to consider who are disabled people, who are not disabled people. What makes someone disabled? How does someone become disabled? It is something with the body or something more than that, the body, right. So, the second question that we have is, who has the right to speak on their behalf? So, let us say for example, if there is something called disability, who is going to speak for them? Who is going to talk for them? Who is going to bring their voices in the forefront, right. So, who has the right to speak on their behalf? That has become second significant question, because so far what we have noticed that it is always the third person who speaks for the need or the concern of people with disabilities. It is not disabled people who come and say, hey, no, not this, this is what I want. And obviously, keeping this in our mind, we will also be talking on autonomy, we will also talking on choices, we will also talking about certain other concepts which are always overlooked in relation to people with disabilities, right. So, before the 1980s, what we find that academic interest in disability was largely limited to conventional individualistic medical explanation with only few notable exceptions, right. What I mean by this is that before 1980s, disability was always considered to be a problem associated with a disabled person, right? It was always thought as if that it only concerns individuals. None of society is not supposed to be bothered, right? Society is not supposed to be concerned, because it has nothing to do with society at all. It's a personal concern, and they have to visit medical institution, meet doctors, and to be and they must fix their problems, right? So far that is how people were looking at disabled people, right? But before the 1980s I am talking about, because after when the 1980s, certain academicians started talking and started looking at different perspectives to look at disabilities, right? I will talk about all these perspectives in a couple of minutes, or maybe in the next lectures. So when we look at the scholars from other field, they engaged with disability, right? They often reproduced these medical framework uncritically, and we have a very key example is the work of influential American functionalist and also sociologist called Talcott Parsons, right, who focused on medicine as a tool for social integration and control. And since then, various perspectives on illness have dominated American sociology. So now here you see that there are sociologists, they are looking at what medicine does to the society, not to the body, right? And they are more examining that how through the medical institutions or by administering the tabloid or that administering the medicines on the body of patients, society is integrated and is controlled, right? So here, I mean, if you read Talcott Parsons' work, you will interestingly see that he is more talking about how society is integrated, what are the methods through which society is integrated, and order in the society is imposed, what are the ways through which people are integrated socially, right, and culturally. But it does not directly talk about that how people with disabilities are marginalized. It does not talk about the experiences of people with disabilities. So here we have a kind of a hint where we can read more to understand that how disability studies evolved. But I use this example, in fact I brought the work of Talcott Parsons just to tell you that how sociologists had focused before 1980s that medicine is an important tool for social integration and control. So Parsons has a very beautiful concept of a sickness as a social status, right? Sickness as a social status, right? Let's say for example, when you say you are sick, what does it do? What responses does it create, right? If you are sick, you can take a leave from going to school. If you are sick, you will be exempted to go to any public ceremony, right? If you are sick, people will visit you and show their concern, love or emotions, right? So what I mean to say that I don't want to go into detail talking about what is the Parsons concept of a sickness is, but for now what I want to tell you is that Parsons concept of sickness as a social status, it along with associated rights and responsibilities of the sick role had a significant influence on sociology worldwide, right? And these are the ideas later were expanded upon by interactionist and interpretive approaches, right? And so if you want to get into the disability studies, I would say that read Talcott Parsons and also look at the readings done by interpretive approaches or by the interactionist theoreticians, right? Because that would give you an idea more about disabilities. Moving ahead, what we see interestingly that after influence from Parsons and other sociologists, we have different way to think where people started questioning that disability should not be only reduced to the, it should not be an object of study by medical practitioners, but there is a problem the way also society intervenes into disability, how society is not very conducive in accepting people with disabilities. So Britain's first disability studies course did not emerge from sociology department or even with a traditional university setting. Instead, it was developed in 1975 by an interdisciplinary team at the Open University. This is a kind of a factual information which I have provided this to you, but it doesn't mean that we are supposed to overlook the sociological insights and political insights. But what I mean to say over here is that there are interdisciplinary team came together and they started offered a course on disability studies in 1975. So disability became a kind of a part of a mainstream academic agenda in the United States and Canada during the 1970s, largely due to a strong connection between disability activism and academia. So you see that in fact, I often say this, that disability became part of public consciousness much before it became part of academic consciousness, right? So people started talking about disability in a civic culture, but it was not touched by academic culture, right? It was not, it was left ignored, left untouched by academic culture. So the point what I am making is that there are people who started raising the voices for disability, for people with disability, their rights, their concerns, so on and so forth. And then disability activism and obviously people who are working in academia, they also realize that we must work for people with disability as well. And when they both came together, then it became a mainstream academic agenda in the United States during the 1970s, right? So disability rights advocates and scholars with an interest in disability issues came together at various conferences, seminars and other places, because they all had one particular goal, which was to talk about the concern associated with people with disabilities. So there were many people I am talking about that they were all from different fields. So you could see that they were both advocates and academics, and they all involved in other civil rights movements as well. So here you see that how people from different discipline, people from different field, they came together to talk about it. So disability became a part of the mainstream academic agenda in the United States and Canada during the 1970s, right? So in recent year, what we see that there is a contrasting and more radical perspective has emerged, which was led by a small but vocal group of predominantly disabled scholars, and many of whom are based in the humanities and cultural studies in universities across North America and Australasia. And this movement has fueled a growing demand for the creation of a more critical and interdisciplinary field of inquiry. So one that aligns more closely with the socio-political stance of a social model approach to disability. So here you see that how slowly and gradually disability studies started emerging in different universities like in North America, Australia, also Asia and other places. It becomes interdisciplinary field of inquiry, right? So people from different disciplines started looking at disability from their own disciplinary point of view, right? So this is what I am talking about, that how different disciplines started looking at disability. All right. So with this, what I would like to conclude the entire lecture is that disability studies emerged in 1970s and 1980s and started talking about the concern of people with disabilities, their rights, their agendas. And when the people from political groups, people from sociology, people from legal field, when they all came together and then they started talking about the concern of disability studies, and later on we see that disability studies emerged as an important field and people came together to they started offering a course. All right. So with this, I would like to end my lecture and say thank you so much. See you next time. Bye-bye.